It started on a Tuesday, gray-skied and forgettable, the kind of day that blends into all the others when you've been out of work too long and your self-worth is scraping the bottom of the damn barrel. I was microwaving some off-brand chili when the phone rang, and for a second, I just stared at the screen like I didn't recognize the name. Mom. We hadn't talked in a couple of weeks, maybe a month. Not since I told her the consulting gig fell through, and she responded with that tight, plastic-sounding, "Oh, well, that's unfortunate, isn't it?" "Still," I answered. "Because you always answer when your mom calls, no matter how old you are or how long it's been since she last believed in you." Her voice came through chipper, too chipper, like she was rehearsing for a damn Hallmark special. "Hey, sweetheart, how's everything going?" I could almost hear her rearranging figurines on the living room shelf or folding napkins for Thanksgiving like she was hosting the president. I played along. Said I was keeping busy, even though that meant binge-watching job webinars and reformatting the same tired resume over and over again. She asked about my car, which was barely limping through its last oil change. Then, right when I thought we were wrapping up, she cleared her throat in that way she does when she's about to say something she knows you won't like. "So, about Thanksgiving," she said, light as air. "This year, we're keeping it small. Just the immediate family. You know, Jake and his wife, the kids, simple." I waited for the invitation to follow. It didn't. There was this long pause, and I swear I could hear my own heartbeat thumping against the phone speaker. Then she said it. "We just thought, well, your father and I agreed it might be nice to keep it, just for those who are doing well right now." It took me a second to process that, and then another few seconds to figure out if I'd heard her right. I laughed, or tried to, but it came out hollow and mean. "So, you're saying I'm not welcome because I'm not successful?" She didn't answer that directly. Of course she didn't. She danced around it like it was a goddamn performance. "No, honey, it's not that. It's just, things are a little tight, and we thought it'd be better to, well, just avoid any awkwardness." Awkwardness. As if I'd show up begging for money or ruin the roast turkey with my unemployment cooties. I don't remember what I said next. Something short. Maybe, yeah, got it. Then I hung up before I could hear the guilt creep into her voice, if it ever even did. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, surrounded by unpaid bills and that damn blinking router that never worked right. My microwave beeped again like it was trying to bring me back to the real world, but I couldn't move. It wasn't just the exclusion. It was the way she said it, so casual, like they'd already had the conversation and just needed to let me in on the final vote. Like I was some goddamn disappointment they had to manage behind closed doors. I opened the fridge, grabbed the cheapest beer I had left, and sank into the beat-up couch I got off Craigslist for $50 2 years ago. The cushions were flat, and the armrest had this weird smell I stopped trying to identify months ago. I cracked open the beer and stared at the wall where a TV used to hang before I pawned it last winter for rent. I'd like to say I cried. That it all came crashing down, and I had some cinematic moment of clarity. But no. I just sat there and drank in silence, numb. This was rock bottom, sure, but not the dramatic kind with shattered plates and broken glass. This was the slow, quiet kind. The kind where no one shows up for your damn funeral because they assumed you'd already died. Later that night, around 11, I booted up the old laptop I kept alive with tape and curses. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Maybe a job. Maybe an escape. I went down the usual rabbit holes: LinkedIn, Craigslist, some dumb subreddit full of side hustles that never paid. My email was open in another tab, full of rejection letters and spam. And then I saw it. Subject line: "Want to change your life? This is your shot." Normally, I'd trash something like that without even blinking. But maybe it was the beer or the humiliation still burning in my chest. Maybe I just needed to feel something different. I clicked it. Inside was a message. Short. Direct. No fluff. "We're casting for a national live pitch show. Have a product, an idea, a dream? Apply now. Change everything. Spots are limited. Don't wait." Underneath that, a form. Name. Contact. What's your idea? I didn't even think. My fingers just moved. I typed in the project I abandoned 3 years ago. A self-repairing coating for solar panels. Sounded nuts back then. Maybe still did. But it was the only thing I'd ever worked on that made me feel like I was building something bigger than myself. Something worth waking up for. When I hit submit, the confirmation screen flashed for a second, and then it was gone. That was it. No guarantee. No promises. Just silence. I closed the laptop, stared up at the ceiling, and whispered, well, that was desperate as hell. But somewhere, deep down, something in me flickered. Not hope. Not yet. Just the tiniest, stubbornest refusal to stay invisible. There's a strange thing that happens when you're the one they don't clap for, when you become the guy who shows up and feels like the whole room winces just a little inside. Like your presence alone might jinx the furniture or bring down the property value by existing in their damn zip code. I remember thinking that years ago at Jake's engagement party, standing next to the shrimp tray like I was part of the catering crew, while everyone else smiled and toasted and asked Jake questions like, how did you land someone like her? And, didn't your firm just expand to San Francisco? Meanwhile, no one looked in my direction unless I accidentally bumped the folding table. You learn to play along with it, the whole act of being fine, of shrugging off the pity or the lack of eye contact or the way your mom introduces you to her church friends like you're a pet she found in a ditch. And this is Ben, our creative one, she used to say, the word creative stretched out like chewing gum stuck to her shoe. Jake got the hard titles, like successful and reliable and provider. I got the adjectives you give someone when you're just trying not to say disappointment. It started young. I remember one Christmas in particular, I must have been 9 or 10, and Jake got this shiny, red BMX with pegs and stunt brakes and everything, the kind all the kids in the neighborhood drooled over. I opened my box and found socks. Literal, itchy, wool socks that smelled like the attic. And I remember Dad saying something like, well, maybe next year if your grades improve. I was 9. Jake had straight A's, but that was because school bent over backward for people like him. For kids who sat still, did their math, and knew when to shut the hell up. I wasn't dumb. I just didn't do well in boxes. I needed motion. Questions. Mess. But they didn't get that. And so from the start, I was the hard one, the kid who never quite fit the mold they cast in cement with Jake's face on it. Even when I tried to build something of my own, when I launched my first startup at 29, a biodegradable packaging company I started with 2 friends from college, my parents didn't come to the opening night. Said it was too last minute and we've already made plans. Meanwhile, when Jake's finance firm threw a company retreat with cocktail hour and catered shrimp, they flew out, dressed up, and posted pictures on Facebook like it was the goddamn Oscars. Mom captioned hers, so proud of our brilliant son. She didn't even tag me. So yeah, when she told me this Thanksgiving was for the successful ones, it wasn't a surprise. It was just the final stamp on a lifetime of knowing I didn't make the cut. After I clicked the submit button on that casting call email, I closed the laptop and just sat there. The beer had gone warm in my hand, and the silence in my apartment felt louder than any train station or crowded room. There's something uniquely painful about trying to believe in yourself while also knowing no one else does. It's like trying to build a fire with wet wood. You strike and it smokes and sputters, but the damn thing never catches. Not really. The next day, I didn't check my email. Not because I was busy, I wasn't, but because I couldn't bear to look and see another thanks, but no thanks. I'd had enough rejection to wallpaper my whole damn apartment with. Instead, I went on autopilot. Woke up, poured stale coffee, scrolled aimlessly through job boards where everything said minimum 5 years experience and must be proficient in 6 kinds of software. I had the skills, just not the story they wanted. Later that night, I walked to the corner liquor store and bought a 6-pack and one of those microwave burritos that could survive nuclear fallout. The guy behind the counter gave me a look like he was debating whether or not to card me, even though I looked every bit my 42 years. When I got home, I sat back down on the couch, cracked open a beer, and pulled up my email out of habit. And that's when I saw it. The message was short. No frills. Just, Ben Walker, your application stood out. Let's talk. Call us at the number below. My heart jumped in a way it hadn't in years. It was ridiculous, I know, a casting call from a show called Pitch or Die, which sounded like a parody or a scam. But something in the way they wrote it felt real. Direct. No glitter, no bull. Just a shot. I stared at the phone number, finger hovering above the screen, pulse hammering in my ears. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I stood up. I walked around my apartment. I shook out the nerves. I actually brushed my hair. Have you ever had someone in your family make you feel like less, just because you didn't make it? Drop it in the comments. I bet Ben's not the only one. I waited until the next morning, because I didn't want to sound drunk or desperate. But at 9 o'clock sharp, I called the number. It rang twice, and a woman answered. Hey, is this Ben Walker? She asked, her voice bright, professional. Yes, I said, throat dry. It is. This is Kara from Pitch or Die. We'd love to have you in the live taping this Friday night. I blinked. Friday. That was 3 days from now. 3 days to prep, to travel, to not screw it all up. Do you accept? She asked. And without thinking, without planning, without weighing the million ways I could fail, I said, yeah. Hell yes, I do. She gave me the details, location, call time, dress code, all that, but I barely heard a word. All I could think about was how I'd just agreed to put my face, my voice, my broken little invention out there on national TV. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finally holding the damn match. The drive from Fresno to Los Angeles is just under 4 hours if you don't hit traffic. But when your car's a 22-year-old Corolla with a cracked windshield and a front left tire that hums like a dying animal above 60 miles an hour, you learn not to push your luck. I left before sunrise, tossing a duffel bag into the back seat with exactly one pair of jeans that didn't have a hole, 2 half-decent button-down shirts, and a folder with the remnants of a business plan I hadn't touched in over 3 years. I'd printed it at a FedEx the night before, the ink still slightly damp because I couldn't afford another $1 to reprint it when the first page smeared. It was cold in the valley that morning, the kind of brittle November air that seeps into your joints and makes you question why you didn't just cancel and crawl back into bed. But I didn't cancel. I didn't flinch. Because once you've been written off by your own family, once you've tasted that kind of rejection, everything else feels like background noise. What's a national audience compared to a mother who doesn't want you at her table? I drove with the windows cracked to keep from dozing off, playing the same 3-minute voice memo I recorded of myself trying to sell the pitch. Over and over again I played it, trying to memorize the flow, the rhythm, the tone that made me sound less like a desperate man and more like someone with a goddamn plan. Somewhere around Bakersfield, I started saying the lines out loud, over the engine, over the wind, like some lunatic practicing for a school play no one would come see. By the time I rolled into Los Angeles, my stomach was tight and empty, but I didn't stop to eat. I checked into a motel that cost me $72 and felt like it hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration. The carpet was sticky. The TV didn't work. But the bathroom mirror was big enough, and that's all I needed. I stood there under flickering lights, rehearsing like my life depended on it, because in a way, it really did. The pitch was for a product I once believed in with my whole damn chest. Back when I thought vision was enough to carry something over the line. A liquid polymer coating that could self-heal under ultraviolet light, designed for solar panels in remote areas where maintenance was a logistical nightmare. I'd sunk 2 years of savings and every ounce of optimism I had into developing the prototype, but back then no one listened. Back then, I didn't have a slick suit or a media kit or a family name that opened doors. All I had was a busted prototype and a bank account that coughed its last breath right around the time Jake bought his second house. I arrived at the studio early, mostly because I had nowhere else to be. The place was buzzing with people, producers with clipboards, lighting techs shouting across scaffolding, interns moving so fast you'd think the floor was on fire. Someone handed me a name tag and a clipboard with a liability waiver thick enough to be considered a novella. I signed without reading it, because what the hell was I going to do? Sue them with the $47 in my checking account? Backstage, they had us line up like cattle. One woman in her 20s was pitching a vegan dog treat company. A guy in a suit had some fintech platform that made me feel like I'd wandered into a TED Talk. I kept my head down, running through my pitch, mouthing the words under my breath while they powdered the sweat off my forehead and adjusted a mic to the collar of my only clean shirt. Then the producer came over, young guy, lots of gel in his hair, looked like he hadn't slept in a week, and asked the question I wasn't ready for. "So," he said, flipping through his clipboard, "got family watching tonight?" I didn't even pause. I lied without blinking. "Yeah," I said, nodding like it was the most natural thing in the world. "My whole family's tuned in." He smiled and moved on, and I stood there gripping the strap of my duffel bag like it might stop me from falling off the edge of the world. Because the truth was, I had no idea if anyone I knew was watching. My parents didn't even know I was doing this. My brother probably had dinner reservations with his in-laws. And the woman I used to love, the one who once said she'd believe in me even when I didn't, well, I hadn't talked to Tessa in almost a year. The moment finally came when the assistant motioned me forward. I stepped into the wings, just off camera, where the bright stage lights cast long shadows and the roar of the audience became this strange, distant hum. My throat was dry. My palms were slick. My heart felt like it was bouncing around in a goddamn paint can. Then the music hit. That high-energy intro theme that sounds like it belongs on a game show where they toss you into a Shark Tank if you mess up. The announcer boomed my name like it belonged to someone important. Next up, Ben Walker with Solar Skin Tech. I walked into that studio with nothing left to lose. Every step felt like dragging a lifetime of failure behind me. I couldn't see the crowd, just lights and shadows and the faint outline of 4 judges sitting behind a sleek table like gods in a modern-day coliseum. And then there was Lyle, the host, slick suit, perfect teeth, voice like a game show oracle. He raised an eyebrow, looked me over like he was sizing up the underdog who wandered in off the street, and then he said it. "You've got 5 minutes to make me believe. Go." I stood there under the glare of studio lights so hot they made my collar stick to my neck, my hands clenched so tightly I thought the microphone might snap in two if I didn't let up. My heart racing like it was trying to outrun every single failure I'd stacked behind me over the last decade. The stage was big, bigger than I expected, and the silence in that first moment was so absolute it rang in my ears louder than the applause that came before it. For half a second, I wanted to run, just turn around and vanish through the same door I walked in from. Crawl back to my motel and tell myself it was better to fail in the dark than to blow up on national television in front of strangers who didn't know my name yesterday and would forget it tomorrow. But then I looked up and I saw them, the 4 judges, each one more intimidating than the last. On the far left sat this finance guy with a buzz cut and a jawline carved from stone, eyes squinted like he'd already decided I was wasting his time. Next to him, a woman in her 50s with silver blonde hair and a posture so perfect it looked painful, flipping through a clipboard with the kind of detachment that made me wonder if she could spot a loser from a mile away. Then came a younger tech guy, maybe in his 30s, sneakers with no socks, sharp black glasses, and a smirk that said he already had 5 startups in the bag. And finally, at the far right, sat her, Clarissa Haywood, CEO of Arcadia Green Energy, billionaire, known for taking big bets on long shots. She looked right at me and nodded, barely, like she was giving me permission to begin. So I did. "Good evening," I said, and my voice cracked like a preteen at a spelling bee, which immediately made me want to sink through the stage floor. I cleared my throat, forced a breath, and started again. "My name is Ben Walker," I said, louder this time, firmer, "and I'm here to pitch a product I believe can change the way we think about solar maintenance in remote areas and high-dust environments." I heard someone in the audience cough, and the buzzcut guy leaned forward slightly, which I took as both encouragement and warning. I dove in. I told them about solar skin, a polymer coating engineered to react to sunlight by triggering microscopic bonds that realign and heal surface scratches, dust erosion, and minor cracks on solar panels. I explained the chemistry, not too deep, but just enough to show I wasn't bullshitting. I laid out the use cases: military bases in deserts, emergency installations in remote villages, massive fields in Nevada where wind carries grit like razors and techs can't scrub every inch by hand. When I hit my rhythm, something in me shifted. My voice stopped shaking. My hands stopped fidgeting. The pitch became something real, something alive, like I was breathing fire into a part of myself that had been comatose for years. I felt myself standing straighter, felt the words come easier. I didn't look at my notes once. Then came the grilling. Buzzcut leaned in, eyes narrow. "What's the cost per square meter?" I answered. He raised an eyebrow. "Manufacturing? Scalability? You got numbers or just ideas?" I fired back with my early estimates. Low production costs, scalable with off-the-shelf components. I even quoted 2 material vendors I'd spoken with back when I still had hope and a prototype. The woman with the silver haircut in next. And why hasn't this already been done? If it's so damn obvious, why hasn't someone beaten you to it? Because obvious doesn't mean easy, I said, meeting her eyes. Most companies want products they can launch in 18 months. I've been tinkering with this for 7 years. Most gave up before they even tried. She didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. The young tech guy spoke up then. "How much equity are you offering?" he asked. I paused. My throat tightened. "I'm asking for $2 million, I said, for 20% equity." They all shifted. Even Clarissa looked up from her notes. $2 million? Buzzcut guy scoffed. "For an unproven formula and 0 sales? Are you serious?" He actually laughed. It was like someone poured cold water down my spine, but I stood my ground. "I didn't come here to beg," I said. "I came here to build." The crowd made a noise then, something between a murmur and a low clap, and I swear to God, that one moment of defiance felt better than anything I'd felt in years. Not because I was being arrogant, but because for once, I wasn't apologizing for existing. Clarissa finally spoke. This might actually be worth something," she said, slowly, like she was still tasting the words. "Self-healing coatings have failed before, but this is different. You're solving a maintenance problem, not a durability one. That's smart." She turned to the others. "I'm in," she said. "But not at $2 million for 20%. My heart dropped. Here it comes, the low ball. "I'll give you $2 million, she said, "but I want 40%. And I want the manufacturing rights licensed through Arcadia." It felt like the whole room sucked in its breath at once. The tech guy piped up. "I'll do 1.5 for 30. The woman next to him raised her hand. "I'll match that. With a royalty." The offers started flying. Fast. Heated. Confusing. I tried to follow, but my head was swimming. Clarissa held up a hand. The room quieted. "Look," she said. "You came here with nothing but a coat, a pitch, and some goddamn guts. You want this to live? Let me help you build it right. $2 million. 40%. Final offer." And I knew right then that if I said no, I'd walk out with my pride but not much else. And if I said yes, maybe, just maybe, I'd finally stop being the black sheep in someone else's success story. I took the deal. The crowd erupted. The host clapped me on the back. Clarissa stood up and shook my hand with a grip that told me she didn't deal in pity, she dealt in potential. As I walked off the stage, still shaking, still stunned, I reached for my phone just out of habit, not expecting anything but spam and silence. Instead, I saw it lighting up like a slot machine about to pay out. 17 missed calls. All from one number. Mom. It was close to 3 in the morning when I finally got back to the motel, the buzz of the cameras and applause still vibrating in my chest like a second heartbeat I hadn't had in years, and I remember just standing outside the door for a while, staring at the warped vacancy sign flickering above the parking lot like it was winking at me, as if to say you came in a nobody, but look at you now. I let out a shaky breath and fumbled with the keycard, which, of course, didn't work on the first try, because success doesn't make the universe suddenly start cooperating with you. It just makes people pay a little more attention when it doesn't. Once I got inside, I dropped my duffel on the sagging bed and sat down like I'd just finished climbing a mountain I didn't even know I'd started. The adrenaline was wearing off fast, replaced by a strange mix of disbelief and exhaustion, the kind of fatigue that doesn't come from physical work, but from carrying years of rejection in your chest and finally putting it down for one damn minute. The motel room smelled like old bleach and cigarette ash trapped in the walls, but I didn't care. My head was spinning. My hands were still shaking. My mouth was dry, and I realized I hadn't eaten since noon. But more than hunger, more than sleep, more than anything, I needed to know. I needed to see if they saw it. If they saw me. I reached for my phone, half expecting the battery to be dead, but it was still alive, still blinking with that little red light that says, "Hey, someone wants you." I unlocked it, and the notifications flooded in like a dam finally breaking after years of drought. 17 missed calls. All from one number. Mom. I didn't open those first. I wasn't ready. Instead, I opened my email. The inbox was chaos, congratulatory messages from strangers, LinkedIn requests, local news alerts, even one from some guy claiming to be a literary agent who saw something special in my story. I didn't have the energy to process it all. But then I saw it, the one that made my stomach twist the moment I read the name in the subject line. From Jake Walker. Subject: Damn, bro. The message was short. Barely a full sentence. Wow, man, congrats. Didn't know you were doing stuff like this. That was it. No question, no invitation, no emotion. Just the bland, practiced tone of someone trying to acknowledge your existence without handing over anything personal. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button before I shut it down. I didn't have anything to say to him. Not yet. Then came Mom's text. We watched. You were amazing. Call me soon. Smiley face. I didn't know what was worse, the double exclamation points or the sudden change in tone, like the last conversation we had never happened, like she hadn't told me 5 days ago that Thanksgiving was only for the people doing well. She didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't say we were wrong. Just call me, like I was the one who needed to reach out now that I was finally someone worth reaching for. And then, as if that wasn't enough, another message appeared, this one from Dad. It was 2 words. Proud of you. That one hit harder than the rest, not because it was tender, my dad didn't do tender, but because it was so damn unearned. He hadn't been proud when I left my job to start a company. He hadn't been proud when I tried to explain the science behind solar skin at Christmas 3 years ago and got laughed off the porch. He hadn't been proud when I moved into a 1-bedroom dump and started driving Uber to stay afloat. But now that the lights were on and the cameras were rolling, now he was proud. It felt like getting hugged by a ghost who only shows up when the lottery numbers hit. I sat there for a long time, just holding the phone in my hand, watching the screen go dark and then lighting it back up again, like maybe the next message would make it all make sense. But none of it did. Because no matter how many claps I got from strangers, the voice in the back of my head kept whispering that it still didn't count. Not really. Not when the love only shows up with a price tag attached. Not when affection feels like a transaction you didn't know you were part of until the receipt showed up in your inbox. I should have called them back. I know that's what most people would expect. That's what they expected. A son with manners, with gratitude, with humility. But I wasn't that son anymore, Not after the way they left me hanging all those years. Not after the way I had to crawl through every kind of failure alone just to finally be seen. So I did something different. I scrolled through my contacts, past the family, past the job interviews, past the numbers I hadn't dared touch in years, until I saw her name. Tessa. It had been nearly a year since we last spoke. The breakup hadn't been cruel, it had been tired. Two people burned out by struggle, unable to keep carrying each other through mud without sinking. But she'd never once looked at me like I was a loser. Not even when the lights were off and the fridge was empty and I couldn't afford gas to pick her up for dinner. She believed in me, even when she knew it might never go anywhere. I stared at her name for 5 full minutes, heart in my throat, thumb twitching like it had a mind of its own. And then I hit call. Because in that moment, after the pitch, after the applause, after the fake congratulations and shallow pride, I didn't want to talk to the people who had only just started to see me. I wanted to talk to someone who always had. The diner was one of those places that looked like it had never quite caught up with the century, with flickering neon outside and cracked leather booths inside, where the coffee tasted like burnt rubber and the waitresses called you hon, without looking up from their notepads. It sat off the highway like a forgotten outpost for the lonely and the lost, which is probably why I told Tessa to meet me there, because despite everything I'd just been through, everything I'd supposedly won, that's exactly how I felt. Not triumphant, not rich, not famous, just quietly, utterly lost. She showed up wearing that same old denim jacket she'd had since our second date, hair pulled back, eyes clear and guarded. No makeup, no pretense. She walked through the door like it wasn't strange for us to be meeting again after nearly a year of silence, like she still knew exactly who I was beneath whatever version of me had just been broadcast to millions of people across the country. I stood up when I saw her, unsure if I was supposed to hug her or shake her hand or just stand there like a statue, but she solved it for me quick, firm hug, no hesitation, no drama. Just enough to say, I'm here, but I'm still me. We slid into a booth, and she ordered a coffee before I could even decide if I was hungry. I didn't need food. I needed something real. I needed someone who wouldn't treat me like a success story just because I happened to survive a 5-minute pitch without choking on my own spit. The waitress poured her coffee and refilled mine without asking, like this was just another regular night for 2 regular people. You look tired, Tessa said, and I laughed before I could help it because it was the first honest observation anyone had offered me in 48 hours. I'd had makeup on my face earlier, lights in my eyes, a suit I couldn't afford pressed onto my body like armor, and not a single person had dared point out the obvious. I was exhausted. Down to the damn bone. I am, I said. But it's a good kind of tired, I think. Or at least, it's not the worst I've felt. She nodded, stirring her coffee slowly, watching me with that look she always had when she knew I was avoiding something. I waited for the congratulations. I waited for the speech. But it never came. She just sipped her drink and let the silence stretch, which made it even more unbearable. You saw it? I asked finally, unable to stand the waiting. She set her cup down and met my eyes. Of course I saw it. Half the country saw it. You killed it, Ben. Really. You were great. The way she said it, calm, steady, like she meant it but wasn't dazzled, was exactly what I needed and didn't know how to ask for. Thanks, I muttered. It still feels fake. It's not fake, she said. It's just not what you thought it would be. And damn if that didn't hit me right in the throat. Because she was right. I thought signing that deal would flip some switch inside me, light up the part of me that always felt like I was chasing something I couldn't touch. But instead, I felt like I was just standing in the same shoes, on the same ground, with a heavier wallet and a louder echo. They called, I said. My parents. Jake too. 17 calls from my mom. A text from my dad. Even he said he was proud. She raised an eyebrow. And how did that feel? I stared out the window, watching a couple of teenagers skate across the empty parking lot like they owned the night. Like they were watching someone else, I said. Like I finally became the version of me they always wanted, and now I'm supposed to pretend none of the years before this happened. Tessa didn't rush to fill the silence, and that silence told me more than any string of words ever could. Finally, she leaned forward, both hands around her coffee mug like she was holding something delicate. I'm happy for you, Ben. I am. But you know they don't get to take credit for this, right? They weren't there when you were eating cold noodles and pawning your stuff just to stay afloat. They didn't believe in this when it was just an idea scribbled on napkins. This win belongs to you, not to them, not to anyone else. I looked at her then, really looked, and remembered every night she sat across from me at that shitty apartment, helping me brainstorm pitch angles or proofreading emails I was too nervous to send. She was there when no one else was. And now she was here again, not because of what I'd done, but in spite of it. I keep thinking about how this was supposed to feel, I said. And instead I feel empty. Like I crossed the finish line and there's just more road. That's what success is, she said. They don't tell you that part. They show you the money, the spotlight, the applause, but they don't show you the quiet afterward. The part where you're still the same person in your own head, wondering if you deserve any of it. I let that sit. Let it burrow into the place I hadn't let anyone touch since the cameras stopped rolling. She glanced at her watch. It was past 2. The diner was nearly empty. The waitress was yawning behind the counter, the jukebox humming a sad country song nobody seemed to know. You finally got everything you wanted, Ben, she said, her voice soft but steady. But what do you want now? And that question, it split me right down the middle. Because I didn't know. Not anymore. So I looked her straight in the eyes, swallowed whatever pride was left rattling around inside me, and told her the truth. I don't know anymore. The city didn't stop for Thanksgiving, not really, not the way small towns or families with 3 generations of casserole recipes did, and sitting there in a corner room on the 11th floor of a faceless hotel just a few blocks off Wilshire. I realized something I hadn't expected. Thanksgiving came anyway, whether I was ready for it or not. It came quietly, not with the clatter of plates or the chatter of cousins or the forced politeness around folding chairs squeezed too tightly into a dining room that had seen better decades, but with a kind of stillness that was almost sacred. A hushed hum from the heating vent, a weak sun filtering through the drawn curtains, and the faint, tinny sound of my own voice replaying on a loop from the television mounted in the opposite corner. There I was on the screen again, paused mid-sentence, eyes wide, hands mid-gesture, frozen in that moment before the deal was signed, before the emails came pouring in, before the people who had once deleted my number were now offering me primetime interviews, book deals, and keynote speaker slots at conferences I never could have afforded to attend, let alone headline. I didn't mute the TV. I didn't turn it off. I let it play like background music, like some reminder of the absurdity of it all, that the world saw one version of me, and I was still here in socks with a hole in the toe, waiting for room service to deliver a microwaved slice of turkey on a plastic plate with cranberry sauce that probably came from a can. My phone had buzzed 11 times since morning. 7 of those messages were from my mother. The first was early. Happy Thanksgiving, sweetheart. Hope you're having a great day. A few hours later, we're doing dinner at Jake's around 3, but if you're free, come by for dessert. We miss you. Then another, a bit more forced. Would love to see you even just for a bit. The last one had arrived maybe 30 minutes ago and read, we saved you a seat. I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I was angry, though God knows, I could have been, but because I didn't trust myself not to respond with something sharp, something final, something that would land like a slap at the end of a family gathering no one would ever forget. And the truth was, I didn't want to burn the bridge, even if I no longer needed it to walk across. I just wanted the silence to stretch long enough for me to figure out what parts of me they were really trying to invite back. Jake sent one message. Just one. You around today? That was it. 4 words. No punctuation. No warmth. A placeholder of concern, probably prompted by Mom's insistence that someone make sure I wasn't still holding a grudge. He didn't ask where I was, didn't say he saw the show again, didn't apologize. And I didn't reply. The room service tray arrived at 4:15, carried by a kid who looked about 19, name tag half falling off his vest, eyes glazed with the kind of fatigue that tells you he's missing his own family dinner to make sure mine arrived on time. I tipped him well, more than I could justify, but less than I wanted to, because somewhere in me there's still that old instinct to hoard success, like it might disappear if I share it too freely. The turkey was dry, the stuffing was mushy, and the pie had a weird aftertaste like metal, but I ate every bite like it mattered, like chewing and swallowing this meal alone was a ceremony I had to perform in order to claim this strange new life. Outside, the city pulsed with quiet movement, cars crawling along the 405 in both directions, some headlights blinking like distant fireflies, and the occasional blare of a siren reminding me that not everyone had the luxury of sitting still. I stood at the window with the plate balanced on the sill and watched the city like it was a living thing, something breathing beneath my feet, something far too big to care about my little story, but kind enough to offer me a front row seat anyway. I thought about the year before, how I'd spent that Thanksgiving in my car, engine off, parked behind a gas station outside Bakersfield, eating a sandwich I bought with quarters and trying to get the heater to work long enough to keep my fingers from going numb. I thought about the silence then, how it felt like punishment, and the silence now, which felt like permission. There was no parade of validation in this hotel room. No chorus of applause, no family to raise glasses and say they'd always believed in me. Just me, my thoughts, and a meal eaten in the kind of peace I hadn't earned, but had somehow stumbled into anyway. I sat back on the bed, the plate cleaned off, the window fogged from my breath, and opened my laptop, not to answer emails or accept offers or check on stock prices, but to write something. I didn't know what. Maybe a journal entry. Maybe the beginning of something bigger. Maybe just a note to myself to remember that even victories feel quiet when you're used to shouting just to be heard. The screen lit up, the cursor blinked, and after a long pause, I typed a single sentence. Success is quiet when it's real. About 3 weeks after the show aired, just long enough for the buzz to simmer into a low hum, but not long enough for the headlines to stop calling me the guy who made it, I packed my duffel bag again, same one I'd carried into the studio that night, and drove east with no clear destination, just a direction and a stubborn ache that told me I needed less of everything, not more. I passed up the rental properties with rooftop decks and smart lighting, ignored the offers for condos near Venice Beach where everyone knew your name because your face had been on TV, and instead found a place off a cracked desert road where the wind didn't care who you were before or who you might become tomorrow. The house was small, barely more than 4 rooms tucked behind a rusted wire fence, with sand that crept in through the windows no matter how tightly you sealed them and a porch that creaked like an old man every time you stepped on it. There was no Wi-Fi, no landline, no cell reception unless I climbed the nearest hill and pointed my phone at the sky like I was praying for a signal. And for once in my life, that was exactly what I wanted. No pings. No push notifications. No calls asking me to come speak at another conference or tell my story again like I hadn't already lived it 100 times over. I turned down 3 major interviews that first week alone, one of them with a national morning show that promised to fly me first class and put me in a luxury suite with ocean views. I didn't even open the itinerary they sent. I canceled a 5-city speaking tour that my agent said would make me more money than I'd ever seen in a year, and when she asked why, all I could say was, because I don't want to sell the version of myself they want to hear about. That didn't go over well. She stopped calling after that. My parents, on the other hand, didn't. They kept trying. Every few days, another voicemail from Mom, just checking in, sweetheart. Then another, we're thinking of doing a family dinner soon, Jake and everyone. Would love to have you there. Dad even sent a couple of short texts, things like hope you're good and you should call your mother. I didn't respond to any of them, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't know how to say what needed saying without cutting deeper than I meant to. I spent my mornings walking the dry, cracked land around the property, listening to the wind whip through scrubby bushes and tumbleweeds that rolled with the kind of confidence I used to envy. I cooked my own meals. I read books with pages I could dog-ear and underline. I wrote things that weren't pitches or press releases or scripted answers to the same 5 questions I'd already been asked a dozen times. And for the first time since I was maybe 12 years old, I felt like I was inside my own life instead of watching it from the cheap seats, waiting for someone to call my name and let me onto the field. And then one night, just as the air started to shift from heat to chill and the stars pushed their way through the dusty sky with a quiet ferocity that always made me feel small in the best possible way, I did something I hadn't planned, something I never thought I'd do. I sat down at the old wooden desk that came with the house, warped drawers, sticky knobs, probably older than I was, and pulled out a piece of paper. Real paper. No screen. No backspace key. Just ink and silence. I wrote a letter. It wasn't long. I didn't spill my guts or unload my grievances or try to make them understand everything I'd carried all those years. I'd already tried that in my own way, in the choices I'd made and the ones I didn't. This wasn't about convincing anyone anymore. This was about closing a chapter not with a door slammed in someone's face, but with the gentle click of something finally, mercifully shut. I wrote, "You taught me that love was a scoreboard. I'm not keeping score anymore. Happy holidays." Then, no anger, no bitterness, just the truth as I'd come to understand it. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope I found in the drawer, and mailed it the next day from the tiny post office in town, where the woman behind the counter wore a Christmas pin that jingled every time she moved and didn't ask a single question about the return address written in small, tight letters. I never heard back. At least, not directly. I heard from Jake once, maybe a month later. He sent a message that said, "Mom's been quieter since the letter. Just thought you should know." I didn't reply to that either. Some silences don't need to be filled. Some things lose their power when you stop showing up to defend them. A week later, I unplugged the television for good, left the charger for my phone coiled in a drawer, and sat on the porch with a notebook in my lap and a cup of coffee that tasted like real life, strong, a little bitter, but warming me from the inside out. I looked out at the horizon, endless and unspectacular, and realized I didn't need applause to feel real anymore. I didn't need forgiveness from people who only wanted me around when I fit the part. I didn't need a stage to feel seen. And as the screen fades to black, if this were a story someone else was telling, maybe they'd end it here with some clever quote or a final triumph that wraps it all in a bow. But life doesn't work that way. It keeps going with or without neat conclusions. Still, if you need a last line, take this one. Not every comeback needs an audience.